Yeah, hi, George.
Hi.
Yeah, it's very nice to welcome you in my Soft podcast. And to kick it off with, I just make a small introduction how we met. It was somewhere in Kreuzberg. It was a co-working space. And you were working on a Schooland. It was one of the most interesting projects I've ever seen. You've introduced a novelty way to observe and introduce learning holistically, end to end. And I remember like an introduction, guys, remember you want to build like a house or anything. You don't need just math or architecture or landscaping or density of materials. You need this all to be combined. So the learning should be like a Tetris blocks, one falls from the other, and they should be like, harmonically laid down into like one another. And I was thinking, damn, it was so super interesting. So instantly after podcast, I went on your landing page. I checked it out, like all these blocks, and I only wish it would succeed because, like I think for kids, these kind of projects would really make a difference. But then, when I get to know you better, you say, by the way, I'm practicing this every day because I have many kids. How many kids do you have? 4 kids. So for everyone works in IT knows how difficult it is to handle with your day-to-day routines and obligations. And if you have 4 kids on top of that, and if successfully manage to educate them and build a startup, you must have something behind. So since that, I was following you very closely, and I've read pretty much all of your books, and I'm quite passionate about that.
Thank you.
and to continue, somebody smart told me, like back in the days when we didn't even have startups, he said like every startupper needs to read Snow Crash from Neil Stephenson, because it described this utopian world of things that we can't even imagine. And what was been written in that book is now a reality, because like he even invented the word metaverse, and so the Facebook now is a metaverse. And when I was reading your first book, A Tribe, it was exactly like like the architecture and ideas and characters were all coming of these ideas. And I was like one of the first readers, and I told you, hey, it when I read it looks like it wasn't written by you, it was written by Neil, and you didn't even know who Neil back then was, so like
exactly, very true.
And this brings me to a question: do you believe that like innovative or super new ideas, they are born in like in the universe and at the same time in different heads, and then getting like spread through individuals?
I have a good friend who is a writer as well, Aaron, and he has this belief, and he really believes it. He says, when you write a book somewhere in a parallel universe, that book is happening in reality. It has effect. In the beginning, I took it as a joke, and of course, it's difficult to prove it. But at some stage, especially looking back at Philip K. Dick books, he had this encounters where he wrote characters in his books, and he met them later, and really, these 2 characters, this woman and this man, who he had written about, and then he meets them in real life. She was, I think, 19 and was a drug addict, and she had a boyfriend who was a policeman who was abusing her, and it was exactly the story he had written a couple of years before. So I personally, as crazy as it sounds, I do believe when we write, we create like visions for the future. Especially when we write books, sci-fi. For me, I always saw them as a way to project, my ideas about the future. Especially, yourself, if you have kids, you are, I think, a bit more concerned, because it's not just going to be yourself who's going to live in that future, it's your kids as well. So that's why for me, this whole idea, looking at how much time they're spending, playing computer games, and how the internet, how powerful it became, it was almost like logical. That the next stage would be a society which would live more or less parallel in these two dimensions, the virtual one and the real one. So, yeah.
And when I read your books, a lot of stuff that you have in there, they're very realistic. So like it looks like some of the chapters are written by experts in the field. When you touch upon some technology aspect or programming or some history, well, it's all connected to the historical part. This is why I love it, because like it feels as a novel wrapped up in the science fiction like shell, but placed into like a historical reality. So this is why I love your books. But how technical you are? Like, why are they so real when you get to read them?
Well, I started with I had the first ideas about my e-learning startup, Schooland in 2010. So automatically, because it was going to be a website, I started getting some basic knowledge, PHP, back then it was Drupal 2.3, So, and then later Ruby on Rails. So automatically I had to learn. I am from profession, I'm an architect and project manager, the last 12 years, but still I had to get to know these technologies. But what is important for my books, although they are sci-fi, I try more or less to describe a reality which I could imagine the next 5 years, or let's say 10 years max. So they are not this kind of sci-fi where we're going to Mars, and we're building a new civilization like 100 years ago. For me, it's literally, I want to describe a reality that I'm going to live myself in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why I do a lot of research on technologies which are almost at a breaking point, So I look what is there around, and this might happen the next 5 years. And based on that, that's how I describe the realities in the book. So there is a lot of research in the background.
And I must admit that sometimes it's scary. I remember the last time we met, it was like right after COVID, and you released your book, and it was a lot of things described what is going to happen. And I don't want to spoil anyone who would still read your book, The Code, but just in a nutshell, we were coming like right after COVID, and in this book, artificial intelligence is able to predict future for society in form of simulation based on basically any data you have. And the COVID was an input, and output would be, okay, behavioral threads 2 years after or 5 years after. And nobody knew what's going to be happening. Are we going to have a new lockdown or not? And I was like, oh, I'm just going to read what George has to say about that. And you were like so precise, like with recipes, what the politicians will do and what the outcome is waiting for us. So I was like, well, I don't want that. I don't want. So when you create these stories, like how do you go about that?
I mean, it scares me as well, honestly, now, especially the code. I published it on the 1st of April, 2021, right? And there's a big, long chapter about the metaverse. And if you remember, in April 2021, most of the people had never heard the word metaverse. Had no idea what Snow Crash. So I sometimes wonder if Mark Zuckerberg read my book and then in November, he declared the metaverse. Of course not, but and then also there's a chapter where I speak about OpenAI, and back then, like a year before, so in 2020, when I started researching different initiatives, which were working on artificial intelligence, and I was like convinced that OpenAI is going to be the one So that's why I've mentioned it in the book as well, you know. And again, this is 2021, so before anyone knew, let's say the tech world, of course, knew about OpenAI because of Elon Musk, but the 99% of normal people didn't know anything about it, you know. And then, so how do I go about it? Again, I've worked in 12 countries, you know, so I've pretty much learned, I think, a lot how to look at signs and interpret them, you know, in what direction a society is going, you know, how technology is influencing us. I try to look at the broader picture. I get involved in politics. I read a lot of news every morning, you know. There are at least 12 to sometimes 20 online magazines that I read every morning. I sign off to all the beta tests, any company, you know, any product that comes out. So it's really it's based a lot on basic research. You know, if you have the passion behind it, and then yeah, as I said, the prediction comes maybe even myself living and working in war zones in dangerous places. You also learn to predict, you know, where is it heading. So maybe, yeah, I guess that's part of it. You know, this is survival instinct. You know, I've been to so many crazy situations that more or less I have built up this way to look a bit ahead, you know, without letting your fears because mostly we misjudge the future because of our fears. You know, like it happening now with artificial intelligence, people are afraid. So automatically they're shutting it down, you know, where I try to put everything together like puzzle pieces. And I must say, what helped me a lot as well, you know, I worked almost 10 years as interpreter for the criminal police in Germany, you know, 6 years in Dresden, 4 years in Berlin. And that one helped me as well, that how the police puts together, you know, such cases, how they collect piece by piece every information, and they try to build a picture, you know, before they're making an opinion. So I am as well exactly that way. You know, I speak to so many actors, you know, what is your opinion? You know, what is your opinion? What is your opinion? Like, not only one side, I take all the sides. You know, you're against this. Okay, why are you against it? You know, you're pro this. Why are you pro this? So I try to be very neutral, you know.
What were you? You were a translator, right? Or like?
Yes, for Albanian and German.
So you're still fluent in Albanian?
Yes, yeah. Well, not as much. It was 30 years since I left Albania, but in Dresden I was very active, you know. So I learned a lot, especially working for the federal police as well in complex cases. So it's mind-blowing, you know, and I use the same expertise I learned back then when I write the books. You know, I try to see them as a case to solve. So it helps me a lot.
You know, I don't want to label anyone, but like, you know, Albanians instantly you have like what you're thinking about, okay, like Albanian gangs doing some smuggling, and then George is trying to, like, you know, translate, and he's in charge to precisely putting the words, you know, right in the spot.
Exactly. Yeah, very complex cases, organized crime, I tell you.
George, you were working with Doctors Without Borders, and you've spent some time in Rwanda. Correct me if I'm wrong.
In Rwanda, in Ethiopia, in Burundi, in South Sudan.
And right after you came back to Berlin, you say, you know, like, it gives me perspective. Everything I've seen, everything I've experienced gives me perspective. And the same thing you've mentioned, like, you know, knowledge and observation gives a lot of perspective on everything we see and kind of observe. And the same thing with AI. So we have two individuals. So also in your books, you've in the code, you mentioning OpenAI and Sam Altman early at the beginning of the book. And also you've mentioned Eliezer Yudkowsky, but now he is actually one of the leader in putting down the paper to shut down the further development of artificial intelligence beyond GPT-4. So they have a lot more insights and opinion but yet still represent totally different fractions. So one is for, the other one is against. Why do you think it's happening? Like, they should like be like they've seen both sides of the barricade. So I think if they've collected enough evidences to create an opinion that help us, like all the guys that only using ChatGPT on the user end, and help us to understand and drop all the fears that we might have. Instead, somebody would create a paper, media would pick it up on that, and we live in a very divided society again. So, George, what is happening, and what is your opinion here?
Well, if we talk about, I don't know if I pronounce the name right, Yelizur, right? Who talked to Lex Friedman lately. I listened to the podcast. If I remember, because I've mentioned it twice, I don't know, Rocco's Basilisk? This thought experiment?
No. Elaborate on that.
I have mentioned it both in both my books. And Rocco's Basilisk is this idea which came forth from this user of Less Wrong, which is the forum where he brought forth the idea that an artificial intelligence, once it becomes powerful, is going to punish all the people who didn't help it to come to being. And Yelizir carried off the argument, he called the guy an idiot and blocked the post. And then there was so much uproar in the forum, the people found it not right. So he decided to reinstate it. So if you Google, there's a Wikipedia page about it and everything about Rocco's Basilisk. As I said, I mentioned it in the tribe and the codes. So even, people who have all the knowledge, they can still be driven by fear. They suddenly, whatever it is, I have met so many people who think they are totally rational, total scientists, and then in strange situation, the fear overcomes them and their logic goes down the drain. And this is the thing. When I hear him speak, I hear fear, because again, artificial intelligence is our creation. And I tell all the time, don't underestimate human intelligence and don't underestimate human stupidity. You know what I mean? So this is a fact where they balance each other. So the idea that suddenly we have this powerful artificial intelligence and then some dude will take over it and will rule the world, or artificial intelligence will come and kill us all and become almighty. Again, that's Hollywood. That's too much of Hollywood, which has influenced our minds. When it comes, there's one thing, of course, which I cannot deny. Let's say when it comes to cybersecurity, that's a different field. I don't have the knowledge on that to say, okay, with artificial intelligence, you can hack systems and destroy them. I am not an expert in that. But when it comes to artificial general intelligence, which we'll use in our daily life to help us do the work, I see absolutely no danger. I see more the total enhancing, of our society. I see the first time we'll be able to answer questions like, what is our brain? How does the brain work? What is consciousness? How do we think? How do we logic? Like, for me, this is an amazing opportunity that we humans can reflect, and say, hey, I see really more positive than negative sides,
Well, I almost daily use ChatGPT to help my older daughter. She's in gymnasium, German gymnasium. So they are going through linear functions or some calculations of volume of some objects where you need to combine different things. So you need to, a lot of time, simplify equations. And then it takes me some time to understand the whole concepts. What I do instead, I just write like what needs to be solved, and then I ask ChatGPT to run me through step by step how to simplify it. And I'm amazed how well of a job it does. It basically says, okay, let's divide two sides by 2. Let's find whatever common denominator, and explain me step by step. So then I learned that, and I try to explain it to my daughter in the most simplest way I could. So I feel like a hero, mathematical hero back home. And I was wondering, how did you use ChatGPT until now?
Well, I started, I think, on the 2nd of December. It was like literally a couple of days after they released ChatGPT, because I had signed already. I was in the queue, to test it. And since then, I've been using it every day, because I'm writing my book. It helps me amazingly, do all the research. It summarizes it. Before I'd had to go through 20 websites before I had the information, copy paste, go to my documents, and now it's done in seconds, The one thing. The other thing is, of course, what we writers know is this writer's block. There are days where you're like, I have no idea what to write. So what do? I go to ChatGPT and say, look, I want a dialogue, let's say, between the teacher and the student, a heated dialogue about the future of humanity. And then it blows your mind with ideas, I was like, make it more sarcastic, make it more. So it's such a powerful tool, It's such a powerful tool, especially, let's say, you said it very well. Before you, myself as well, would sit there, help our kids for hours, either math or physics or whatever. Now, this time we could have spent doing something great with them, going hiking, We would have used ChatGPT, it would have been finished in 10 minutes or half an hour, and the rest of the time, we could watch a movie together or do any other activity. So you see how much potential that has to save us all this trouble, which we don't have to go through anymore. It's really, yeah. I'm very optimistic. I write emails. I wrote to all the members of the parliament. I send the emails about a case I'm involved as a whistleblower. And I did it all with ChatGPT. And it was fantastic. It was like I said, ChatGPT, use your journalistic skills to write an email to a member of the parliament, German parliament. And the results have been fantastic,
Well, coming back to human stupidity and how we should not underestimate that. And it also comes back to your decision to move to Switzerland. I remember you were planning to move, and it's like, why would you go to Switzerland? It's like super expensive. And one of the arguments, besides all the upsides of living there, was your projections on global conflicts. You say, okay, Switzerland is one of the safest, most stable country in the world, and I might believe that something shitty might happen in Europe. And it was even, I think it was 6 months before the war break up.
Exactly.
So, and also I've read an interesting blog that we live in a time where technology is so much ahead of us versus our mental stability. So the stupidity still wins in the argument. Do you believe that AI could help us to navigate through all these political crises that we have in the world, not just in Europe?
Definitely. Last week I founded a party, based on artificial intelligence. The party is called Mouse, and I believe the Mouse stands for menschliches, automatisiertes, unabhängiges System. So, human, independent, automated system, and I totally believe that in the future, artificial intelligence would revolutionize democracy, because look, every country, including Germany, is in crisis, political crisis. Every country. We, as a society, we are stuck. We know now capitalism is not working. We know communism didn't work. We know religion doesn't work. So we're like at a dead end, in terms of values, morals. And this is the only hope, honestly. We don't have any other system to propose. Let's say if we started tomorrow a revolution, we're like, we are fed up now with the German government. What do we propose? You know what I mean? So we are, as a society worldwide, we are stuck. We don't know any other alternative. We have no idea. And this is the chance where an artificial intelligence, which talks to billions of people, after it grows, we can ask, okay, here we are. What's going on? The 1% are getting wealthier. The rest is getting poorer. What can we do? Democracy is failing. We're going back to nationalism, to whatever. There's so many open questions. We're confused. What is gender? What is this? What is that? And I have 4 kids who ask me all these questions. So suddenly our problem has become superhuman. You know what I mean? It has become superhuman because it has become so complex that we don't understand anymore. Nobody does. So that's why I have the hope that AI will be able to give us some answers in that direction.
What are the most difficult questions they ask you? I mean, like you already have adult kids, well, grown-ups. Are they still like throwing you something that you of course you had about and thinking, oh my God, like I don't know what to even answer?
Well, to start with, when it goes to profession, what should I do? What profession? And the funny thing was, because a year ago, like I still said, hey, programmer, learn how to code. And now I'm like, oh, thank God you didn't decide to become a programmer, because now with ChatGPT, that profession might be like 99% out of the window. So you see, it's literally even the simple thing as, okay, medical fields, is pretty safe to some direction, but I'm not the kind of parent who says, choose the safest way, like choose your passion, but also keep in mind that, that how far the passion is going to bring you, So I'm like, yes. And then, of course, it comes the whole value of, especially my kids, and probably the same with your kids. My youngest sons, they were born in Ireland, then we lived in Australia. Now they went to Germany. Now they're in Switzerland. So they're like, what is my identity? And my father is Albanian. My mom is German. I am now in Switzerland. I was born in Galway, Ireland. Dad, where do I belong?
It's extremely interesting. Like we in Europe, especially now with a few humanitarian crises in the last couple of years that we had in Syria or now in Ukraine, like there are so many people live in dispersed location, and they're settling down, creating new families, growing up. So automatically their kids will have exactly the same problem as your kids or my kids. Like
exactly.
You bring cultural code, and then applying this on a totally different field. And is that advantage or disadvantage?
It depends. It is a big advantage because the world, in one direction, is globalizing, but the other direction, with the rise of nationalism, and I like to call it a healthy nationalism. Because you see, that's the conflict between, you have the traditions, the cultures, we like to go to other countries and then to enjoy their music, their clothing. On the other side, we completely criticize it as bad, So this line between how far do I go without having to be right-wing or I don't know, it has become so blurred, so confusing, especially for a person like me, born in Albania, I left, 30 years ago. I speak 3 languages, German, English, Albanian, and none of them I speak good enough to say it's my mother tongue, So we are at a turning point, between having to choose completely open the world. Does that work practically, when suddenly from every country people are coming and mixing, or are we reinstating the borders? And the shock, we saw it during COVID, how fast the borders, like overnight, they were there, So it's really, it's a difficult one, honestly, As I said, it's almost like a daily discussion with my kids because I see their fights trying to identify themselves,
But if you look at the near future, do you still believe our future lays in unification? So the model of European Union, we actually find a model and then try to unite around this model, like freedom of movement, freedom of economic liberty, or there is going to be idea of independence and divide, and this is what happened recently with Brexit again.
Economically speaking, it's very difficult to close borders without the economy to collapse. If you look again, I don't know if the number is exact, but let's say over 90% of the products we have in our supermarkets comes from another country. So if tomorrow you decided to close the borders, the economy would be collapsing. So economically speaking, it's almost impossible. But on the other side, we see that countries are trying to go retract. They realize their dependencies. Especially, I talked to someone, let's say, about the quantum computers. Quantum computers are almost like an atomic bomb as well. It's technologies or the chip production. We see now that we can't open up everything anymore because the chip production will be very important when it comes to artificial intelligence. So slowly I see this trend that the governments are realizing that opening all the markets, opening all the border, this doesn't have as many advantages as we used to think, and I see the trend reversing a bit, honestly, and especially with the war in Ukraine, I see the future more closed than it is till now,
I was reading an interesting blog from a guy called Alex Kuboskin. He's actually a financial specialist, but he combines all different data sets to describe the history and evolution. And he mentioned, he described it in his blog that for the next big change to happen, what is missing in the world is a transition to energy production that would outpace the current capacity. So this is what we're talking about, fusion or next loop of atomic energy, which we mainly frozen Europe, like after the few disasters, it's just in a stale mode. But even to come to quantum computing, to be operated at scale, like on economy level everywhere, we need also like this energy layer that is going to be so cheap and powerful and affordable, and we don't have it yet. And with scarcity of energy resources, which we experience now with the Russian pipelines, it creates even more fear, more isolation. So we're kind of like, stepping forward and stepping backwards in the same dance. And I believe that with broader introduction of cheaper source of energy, we might have another chance to yet another loop of civilization. Would you share this idea with me?
Civilizations go in cycles, they come technology-wise, they reach a peak, and then they break down, and then there is a dark period, and then the new civilization is born, which is more powerful. They learn from the lessons, So it's I personally think we are at the peak already, and we'll see the next steps will be a darker period. I think we'll have a huge financial economical breakdown. We'll have some years of whatever rearrangement, and then we'll have the next big step in the next level of technological development. So at the moment, I see a downturn. We have the three powers, Russia, China, Europe, and the US, together, and they're all in a dead end. Politically, economically speaking, they're all at a dead end. So automatically, they'll look now on the way out of it. So that's why I see for the next year some dark times, honestly.
is there a single event scenario that could help to end this all? Like, let me put it this question: if if the war would stop tomorrow, would this change the course of history, or we're still going to be in this trajectory of unknown until something major happened?
Look, the war is a way out. As I said, all this Europe, US, Russia, and China, or Brazil, or India, they're stuck. You know, as I said, we are economically, they're stuck. They're politically stuck. We don't know any further what to do. Nobody knows, what's the way forward. So automatically, in such conditions, historically speaking, the only way out is some kind of war, be it a proxy war, be it a cold war. It doesn't have to be necessarily a military war. It can be a cold type of war, which kind of ruins the societies as well, because it installs panic, it installs fear, paranoia. And so this leads to this dark times, and then, as I said, because again, they have no way out, this is a fact, it's no way out. These are inside, be it in Germany, we see it, politically speaking, we never had the forming of a government take 6 months, we never had 3 parties which are fighting constantly, So, and it's the same in the US, any country in Europe, doesn't matter where you look, they're in crisis. And China is in crisis, Russia is in crisis. So all are in crisis. So the only way around is for some bigger crisis, which, where chaos breaks out for a while, and then it reorganizes again, and then new concepts are born out of it. Out of pain, out of suffering.
But we had this, let's call it artificial war in form of globalization. It was like global change of the cultural landscape through a system of values that came from the Western world and was spread through any countries who was economically adopting these standards. And so a lot of people were opposing and saying, okay, we need to fight these standards and create physical war, like a bloody war, because people throwing the war on us, economic war, through globalization. And I actually believe that globalization was one of the ways you describe as a peaceful war. You make a transition, but people don't have to die. And I'm just afraid that if we're not going to find a way to peacefully transition globally, the next kind of military war might have a disaster ends, because most of the countries that you described, they have nuclear power, and it's been also described in Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson as a system of checks and balances. One of the main characters drives motorcycle, and there is a nuke installed in the motorcycle. So if somebody kills him, automatically nuke goes off and kills everybody in a very large proximity. So they can't even kill him with a sniper rifle because like this, the blast would be too big for any sniper. Do you have any fears that we might experience another nuclear disaster?
No. I think if it was the case, if someone decided to throw a nuke somewhere, they would throw it in a place where it wouldn't kill a lot of people, more like as a warning. You know what I mean? Because again, everyone knows if once you go down that road, it means suicide. And that's a fact, So the nuclear war is suicide for anyone. So if, again, as I said, if someone went down that road, they would throw it somewhere where they say, look, we did it, it killed a couple of people, but we'll do it worse if you don't negotiate, I'm not worried about a nuclear war. I see it more as a economical collapse, I see economical collapse. Because if it didn't happen, honestly, like similar how Russia, not only Russia, the whole East Bloc, you remember? There were so many scenarios back then. You were old enough, I'm old enough to remember it still. There were so many scenarios where we thought, war will break out, horrible, and it imploded. So we're really at exactly this stage where you look at the superpowers, they're imploding. US is imploding. European Union is imploding. China is imploding. Russia is imploding. You know? So that's why I see it more like the East Bloc when they imploded in themselves, and then there was the chaotic time, and then after that they built up these new economies, and that's what I see in a global scale. Implosion.
If we play the simulation, like in the science fiction simulation with you, and describe 3 scenarios from, like, mainstream sci-fi movies. So there is a Blade Runner, there is a Terminator, and there is a Matrix. So AI plays slightly different role. In Blade Runner, they describe this big event. It's called blackout, when smart android, so human-like robots with artificial intelligence, they decided to wipe out the data of themselves, so people can't track them and call them robots. So they want to be human. So they decided to destroy all the data centers. So they blow them off, all these like big data centers, and with that blowout, they created like a massive blackout, because like the electricity, nothing worked for some time. In Terminator, we know it's a doomsday. Basically, Skynet decided to kill all. So it's like, the worst scenario that Yudkowsky would describe in his podcast. And the Matrix is some kind of like a hybrid way, because in the Matrix, I don't know if you've seen these cartoons, the robots have created like an island, and they've outpaced human by technology, and people were always competing with them until they decided to start a war with Matrix. And humans destroyed the world because they covered this up with nukes and basically with the ashes, so that robots wouldn't get solar. And then the robots would decide to take energy from humans and create it like a matrix.
All right.
So it's like 3 ways of where are we going to be going. So you being like a scientist and science fictionist, what do you think might be the most optimistic outcome for bad scenarios?
Well, I have described it in my book, The Code. That's honestly the scenario which I see more realistic in the near future. When it comes to robots, I am pessimistic. I remember, was it 2011, 2012, when I was the first time in Silicon Valley? And they had just started, I think, Google cars, the self-driving cars. They had these things on top, And back then, I remember even at Stanford, and I was talking to people in San Francisco, they're like, next year or maximum 3 years from now, the self-driving cars will be everywhere. And look where we are 10 years later. I'm not even sure they'll come in the next 10 years, honestly. There is a lot of dispute. I don't want to. So what I'm trying to say is, these are cars, technology which has been around, 100 years, and still they haven't managed that leap. Now imagine robots, which can walk and think and talk. And so I am very skeptical when it comes to such highly defined robots. But what I see in the near future is the whole metaverse story. So we'll get to the point where AGI, artificial general intelligence, will eventually do a lot of jobs. So we'll have a lot of people who will be jobless, and then at some stage we'll need a universal basic income. That will be unavoidable, and those people will do what 300 million people, I think, a month do, or almost 1 billion every month or every day. They'll play computer games, as crazy as it sounds, So the computer games will be so realistic, will have brain-computer interface that people will not want to share the reality anymore, because in those simulations, and these are technologies which are happening already. These are not technologies like the Terminator robot, which might be in 100 years, if at all, So this is for me very close. We'll have a huge amount of people who will have nothing to do, and then they'll be like, I'll play games,
It's described in Expanse. I don't know if you've seen this TV series. It's been costed by, I think, HBO and then by Amazon. Like, really cool, because it explains, like, it shows that world in the future where Earth has like a overpopulation, and having a job is a luxury. Most of people live
Yes,
on a universal basic income, very basic. It's just enough to survive, and they all
exactly.
dream to get any job. And but coming back to the topic, let's linger on that with a few ideas. My kids spend a lot of time on screens. I spend a lot of time on screens. So even at some point, I thought I'm addicted, and I decided to remove all social media from my mobile device. I still keep them on desktop, but I don't leash to mobile device anymore. So I don't like constantly look at the scroll the Instagram or Facebook, whatever. But I see kids living with the technology constantly, playing games,
Exactly.
talking, and even if they chat on, they have these group chats in the classes. They have the chat always on, so we still call on and off, and they have this call option and they leave it on. So it's basically being always connected.
Exactly.
Do you observe it with your kids as well?
Oh, definitely, definitely. My youngest is scary. He's playing till 3 in the morning, and the problem is again, there's this between me and my ex-wife. We have a very good relationship, but it's a challenging topic because if you say, okay, you're not allowed anymore, to play your computer, I take a computer away, you have to give an alternative, and the alternative is, where are the other kids? Oh yeah, they're playing computer games as well. So you see, this is not a problem we should solve on a parent per parent basis. This is a problem of the whole society, which we should address. Because as I said, I can't sit there and spend 5 hours a day with my son doing whatever. I wish I could, but I grew up with other kids. I didn't grow up with my parents spending half of the day with me. Of course they had time with me, but so we have to see as a society, what do we do now, with this new generation, now that artificial intelligence is coming and can do a lot, what can they bring, and this is where I bring, for example, in my book, I have this vision where people can choose, they literally can choose. They have a virtual reality, which is unbelievable. You can go in there and you can be whatever, the president, the smartest, the singer, the star, or you decide for this reality and say, I am going to fight to make this reality a paradise. And I have this vision in the description of the metaverse where the streets are totally green. Everything is green because most of the people stay inside. So nobody looks after anything, and the green, the nature is coming back, and the wild animals, So you have a small percentage of people who resist the temptation, and say, okay, as much as I would love to be the king of the world in the metaverse, I'd rather go and plant my carrots here beside my 20-story Plattenbau building, So I almost see the metaverse as a filter, like in the code I described as a filter where humans have to decide, because I myself have been an activist all my life, and I'm tired, having to push people to say, guys, you have kids, you're a parent, you should be worried about the future, and they're like, yeah, and then keep scrolling on their thing. So we'll come at that stage, if we like it or not, where the society will be separated and say, you go live the rest of your life on your metaverse, and I'll try to make a beautiful with this reality given here.
George, I would also like to ask you, because some of my friends, they turn to be digital nomads. So they live and work in different locations. They less attached to one base and rather choose this way of living while they work in a co-working space like you do right now. How do you go about that? Like, you've lived in so many countries and your kids were also in so many places.
A digital nomad, of course, is a nice life to have, but it will be for a minority, who can afford it, who have, it's, let's say if tomorrow everyone became a digital nomad, the world would collapse. So it's just a nice philosophy, because we need the waiter who goes every day to work. We need the cook who goes every day, we need the construction worker. So it's a philosophical thing which is reserved for a tiny minority of society. It wouldn't work for the majority. As I said, the world would collapse, and I can do it because after such a long time, it's very easy for me to adapt to every new place. But if I take, let's say, my oldest son, he went back to the same area where my ex-wife comes from, and he's happy there. It's like, I don't need to see 20 countries in a year. I'm happy with my two friends I have here. I'm happy to see them 3 times a week. So really, we don't need more digital nomads. If you have that luxury, do it, but I wouldn't try to sell it to other people like, I'm having a better life. For me, it's been great, and I know my daughter would be perfect example. She would love that. But I know there are other people, for them it's stress. It's pure stress, having to restart new, And then there is, of course, the other disadvantage of digital nomads coming from a rich country to a poor country. They kind of mess up the local economy sometimes. There are different ideas because they can afford certain things which the locals can't afford. So you have to be careful. I am a minimalist, since 2014, everything I own fits in a rucksack, But if I go to another poor country and then I can afford to buy a big car and rent a super big apartment, I don't think that's very encouraging to the local community. So if you want to be a digital nomad, at least try to reduce your minimum as much as possible, to the local standard before you go and, behold before their nose. So I'm careful with that concept.
And George, you're writing a new book about artificial intelligence. People love these simple cliches, like the top 3 professions that will disappear in the next 5 years because AI will basically change them. In your research, how often do you come to this research, and would you share some interesting facts about AI already? Like what are the professions that we should not encourage our kids learning right now? Are there anything that you would like to talk about?
Well, graphic design. If I think of Midjourney, I'm like a little kid when it comes to Midjourney. Seriously, sometimes I sit for an hour there and just watch what people are doing. I don't know. Have you used Midjourney?
Yeah, but I ran out of prompts pretty quick. It was only 25 tokens they gave you at the beginning, and now I could only watch it. I don't want to buy subscription. Oh, you have paid subscription. Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to Midjourney, I am addicted as well. ChatGPT and Midjourney are the two things. GPT-4 now, where I'm addicted every day. I create, let's say, I write text, and then I create the person like almost parallel. And for a writer, writing a character and giving this prompt to Midjourney and looking at it is unbelievable, So I would say graphic designers, serious. Unless you are some super innovative, you come up with some super, super cool stuff, but that'll be difficult, So that profession, very worried. I'm very worried about that. The other one, writers, of course, content writing, even as a journalist, this is the next stage of murdering journalism because, the journalists have it I have a huge respect for journalists, especially investigative journalists. These are real idealistic people who risk their life, go to war zones or whatever. But considering the fact how easy now I can write in a matter of seconds a journalistic article, this is the last nail in the coffin. It's for journalism, unfortunately. The coding, for me, coding is the simplest one because for an AI to learn how to code is a lot easier than to learn human language, because code is based on rules. Human language has sarcasm, irony, stupidity, whatever. Code doesn't have that. Code is precise. Of course, you have to have a bit of creativity to create, but still. So coding is for me out of the window as well. And what else? Politicians. It's my purpose to get rid of politicians with my party. I am so disappointed from politicians. Germany has now 738 members of the parliament. And I wrote to all of them, thanks to ChatGPT, and I got like 5 answers. And I'm like, how on earth? And this was a serious matter. We were talking about whistleblowing case with involving a huge European company. So it's not just fun. So politicians, I'd be worried as well. Definitely.
What about architectures?
Architecture is between. Someone mentioned a list. Is the least innovative industry. It's like in the bottom 3 out of 100, and I'm not worried because again, architecture has so many variables. I don't know if you're involved in building a house, that it will be very difficult. Maybe when it comes to specifications, doing some drawings, but in architecture, every project is unique. You start from scratch. That's the problem with architecture. I can't say this, I take this project and use it here. It's impossible because the land will be different, the requirements will be different. So I'm not worried about architecture, And the architects, as I said, they are so bad at adapting new technologies. Think about 3D. 20 years ago as a student, when I was studying, we're doing 3D modeling. I thought in the future everything would be done in 3D. There we are 20 years later, we're still doing AutoCAD drawings, 2-dimensional. So no, not worried about architecture. It will be less built, I think, in the future because of resource scarcities, and a lot of speculation, but not because of AGI. Not worried.
Right. Yeah. And just to finish this off with futuristic advice from George, raising kids, what should we advise them already at this stage? How should they go about learning new things? I don't know, adapting technology, playing with ChatGPT or not? What would you personally say to your kids again?
The young one, the other two, they are already in the field, 29 and 26. The other one, my 17-year-old, he is doing a Ausbildung, internship in ergotherapy. So the professions, my ex-wife, she's a nurse, the professions that have to do with the human presence will be the mostly asked for, So they'll not go away. The robots, as I said, they might be 50, 100 years or not at all. But this is what I'm telling my kids, is that forget some kind of high-level study, which it will be easily replaced by artificial intelligence, Go for something where hands are required or personal presence, where you have to give an injection. Medical field, of course, but definitely something which requires human presence. That's what I'm telling, yeah.
So grow and learn how to be a good human.
Definitely. That's the nice thing about AGI, artificial intelligence, because now we have to ask, what does it mean to create a good artificial intelligence? And to answer that question, we have to answer the question, what does it mean to be a good human? That's why I'm so positive, because artificial intelligence is becoming the mirror for us. We are asking all these ethical questions. For the first time, we're saying, what is ethical at all? So definitely, I'm telling my kids, try to network, try to make friends. This is really it's the only currency, as crazy as it sounds. When times get tough, people start relying more on other humans, and especially during COVID, it killed even more that human side of us. It brought the worst in us out. So people got disappointed. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, it's like, try to go back, try to meet more, try to make as many friends as possible. Of course they'll disappoint you and you'll disappoint them, but that's the nature of humanity, is beauty and dirty at the same time, and nasty, or yeah, that's the beauty of it, so as you said, yeah, try to be human as much as possible, because we have too little of it. We have too little humanity. Everybody's rotating around themselves over and over again, and we're not looking around anymore.
Well, George, thanks a lot for this wise world, and really finishing this up with creative flavor. And if you would like to read more from George or get his books, I'm gonna put links down below in the description. And yeah, thanks a lot, and looking forward for the next book that you're creating right now.
Thank you very much, Sergey.
All right, ciao, ciao.
See you.